You're about to meet the creators of A Charlie Brown Christmas, as well as the original cast from 37 years ago. But our story starts back in 1961. By 1961, Charlie Brown and Snoopy had become famous in the comic strips around the world. But no one in television, neither the networks nor the sponsors, believed that the characters could or should be animated. The TV industry felt that the Peanuts kids talk like adults, not like children, and that there was too much meanness about poor Charlie Brown. But then, in 1961, the Ford Motor Company used the characters in their Falcon commercials. This was the first ever animation of Peanuts.
Over 1 million falcons. Isn't it great? It's very nice. Nice? It's beautiful. And it's not fair of Ford to only sell 1 million falcons. So I think you ought to go out and do something for the families who don't own falcons. I'm going. Doing good always gives me a deep feeling of satisfaction.
Although the commercials were a success, television executives continued to show absolutely no interest in animating Peanuts. 2 years later, in 1963, producer Lee Mendelson and animator Bill Melendez created a documentary about Charles Schulz, with the hope that it would lead to an animated special.
I think, a little bit like everyone, we all need reassurance that some people really do like us. But I guess Charlie Brown is mostly me. That's why he often has that dumb expression on his face. But, for example, when I've been beaten in a golf tournament or a bridge game, or maybe if I bowled a bad game on a particular night when I feel low, this is when I come home and really pour it on poor old Charlie Brown. This is when he really suffers the most, when I suffer the most.
Animation was and is very expensive, so the producers could only afford 2 minutes of the animation in the documentary. This was the first time that the comic strip came to life for television entertainment.
So I feel these tensions and all these pressures. So what should I do? Learn to relax. 5 cents, please. What? 5 cents for just that? Is the doctor in? No, I think she's way out. To hear a word. Even as a failure, you're a flop. If I were you, I'd be afraid of what the kids at school would say about that blanket. Do you have a nickel? Flip it in the air. They don't say very much.
In the documentary, Charles Schulz sketched his difficult early years, a childhood which led in part to the eventual creation of Charlie Brown. Charles Schulz was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, the son of a barber. In kindergarten and in first grade, Sparky, as we all called him, showed an amazing aptitude for drawing. In other subjects as well, he far exceeded his fellow classmates. As a result, he was promoted, jumped ahead 2 elementary grades. When that happened, Charlie Brown was born. Because of the promotion, Sparky was suddenly the youngest and skinniest and smallest in his class. He was either ignored, rebuffed, or bullied by his older classmates. This began his lifelong attack on bulliness of any kind, but just as Sparky had been rebuffed in school, producers Mendelson and Melendez were again rebuffed by the networks, and the documentary was never broadcast. But then, 2 years later in 1963, came a stunning development. Time magazine ran a cover story about the Peanuts characters and their amazing impact on the American psyche, stating that Schulz had tapped into the mainstream of American culture in the persona of Charlie Brown. A few weeks later, producer Mendelsohn received a call from John Allen at McCann Erickson, the ad agency for Coca-Cola.
Well, John had seen our documentary 2 years before, and he really liked it, although he couldn't sell it. And he said to me, "Have you and Mr. Melendez and Mr. Schulz ever thought of doing a Christmas show?" And I stretched the truth a lot, and I said, "Of course." And he said, "Well, today's Thursday, we'll need an outline down in Atlanta for Coca-Cola on Monday." I said, "No problem." And I hung up the phone, and I called Sparky on the phone. I said, "I think I just sold a Charlie Brown Christmas." And he said, "What is that?" And I said, "It's something that you and Bill and I have to cook up tomorrow." And there was a long pause, and I held my breath, and then he casually said, "Okay, come on up, we can do it."
The next day, animator Bill Melendez joined Lee and Sparky to create the show. In 1965, 6 years before All in the Family was to break down a lot of barriers, mixing religion with entertainment, especially with animation, was a big old no-no.
The one thing, though, that caused the most comment among ourselves was when Sparky insisted that Linus give the biblical version of the meaning of Christmas. I told Sparky at the time, and I think Lee did too, he says, "Oh, it's very dangerous for us to start talking about religion now." And he said I remember he turned to me with his strange blue eyes and he said, "Bill, if we don't do it, who will?" So I said, I'll go with that.
Coca-Cola bought the special, and the production was underway. Up to that time, adult actors were always used in animation as voices for children. But the producers decided once again to use real kids, ages 6 to 10.
Well, this is Peter Robbins, who became our first Charlie Brown in the 4th spot, and from there became the Charlie Brown on the first half-hour show, the Charlie Brown Christmas.
Yeah, I remember I was about 7 years old and I didn't really know how to read that well, and you would feed me the lines and I would do it word for word. And you have a little Latino flavor to you.
And
so
he
Charlie
imitated
Brown,
even that.
so Charlie Brown had a little Latino lingo going for him.
I said, "We're back."
We're back.
Yeah, see?
We're back.
I remember when I went into audition, I was 7 years old, but even at 7, I did still suck my thumb, and I did have a blanket, and I did use that. And both Bill and Lee both said, "Well, that's Linus."
This is one of my favorite lines from the Charlie Brown Christmas. "I think there must be something wrong with me, Linus.
Christmas is coming, but I'm not happy.
I don't feel the way I'm supposed to feel. I like sending Christmas cards and getting Christmas presents.
And decorating trees and all that, but I'm still not happy.
I always end up feeling depressed. And that was something I couldn't understand, is why, with all these presents and everything going around, why Charlie Brown would be depressed. But I learned to get depressed."
I was picked as Lucy for the Charlie Brown Christmas, and it was because I was told I had a crabby voice.
No. Listen, all of you. You've got to take direction. You've got to have discipline. You've got to have respect for your director.
I'm not really sure if I liked that or not, but what can you do?
Being with all the other kids was like having a second family, and we had a wonderful time on the set. We would run around, and we were allowed to. I remember Bill Melendez having to ask us sometimes, "Wait a while, wait a while." He didn't say, "Wait a minute." It was, "Wait a while," because we were all very anxious and all over the place. And it was a wonderful experience.
We were recording a Charlie Brown Christmas in San Francisco, and Jefferson Airplane was recording next door. They came over to get our autographs, and we couldn't figure out why in the world they wanted our autographs.
This is the only background left that we have from the Charlie Brown Christmas show. First, we do a pencil drawing, after which we ink it, and then we paint it, which will eventually make a complete drawing to be placed over the background. There are 13,000 cells in a half-hour Charlie Brown show. And then we photograph 12 cells per second to give the illusion of motion.
As far as the music, Schroeder would have his Beethoven, and traditional Christmas music would also be used. But the producers made a critical and unorthodox addition.
There was a wonderful jazz musician, a fellow San Franciscan by the name of Vince Guaraldi. And he'd won a Grammy for his Cast Your Fate to the Wind and had written a few tunes for our documentary 2 years before. So we asked him to join us on a Charlie Brown Christmas. So we wrote a few Christmas songs together, including Christmas Time Is Here. And then we remembered one of the tunes he'd written for the documentary. And he performed it at the Monterey Jazz Festival that year, and it was called Linus and Lucy.
The show was finished just 10 days before the broadcast date, and the producers thought they might have a disaster on their hands.
The Christmas show was done, and I saw it complete for the first time in a large theater. I turned to my troops and I said, "My golly, we've killed it." I thought it was such a poor job. I was so embarrassed. And you know, one of my animators turns to me, a guy by the name of Ed Levitt, and he says, "Bill," he says, "you're gonna find that this is the best picture you'll ever make."
Well, I must admit that I shared Bill's concern about the show, and I had very little confidence when I took it back to the network in New York. And the two network executives who looked at it really didn't like the show. They thought it was too slow. They thought that the music didn't work. They thought the animation was too simple. And I really believe if it hadn't been scheduled for the following week, there's no way they were going to broadcast that show.
On December 9th, 1965, A Charlie Brown Christmas debuted on network television. It was watched by 45% of those watching television that night and was #2 in the Nielsen ratings next to Bonanza. Then, a few months later,
the winner is in Hollywood, A Charlie Brown Christmas. Lee Mendelson and Bill Melendez producing.
It's our great pleasure to introduce to you the man who's brought so much happiness to so many people, especially to us for working with him, Mr. Charles Schulz.
Thank you. Charlie Brown is not used to winning, so we thank you.
A Charlie Brown Christmas has been seen in dozens of countries around the world.
Due to the shortage of time, we'll get right down to work.
Attenzione al regista. Le mie indicazioni sono molto semplici. Se punto un dito a destra, rivolgete l'attenzione.
Meine Anweisungen werden einfach sein. Wenn ich nach rechts zeige, richtet eure Aufmerksamkeit auf die rechte Bühnenseite.
です。こうやって首を切るような動作をしたらその指示が終わりという意味です。こうやって腕を回したらスピードアップ。
Je veux un peu plus de tempo, mais par contre, pour peu que j'écarte les mains, il me faut un rythme plus lent.
As I get older, I get a little bit more sentimental watching the specials and seeing it with my friends and family. And I can't think of being a better voice for a better character than Charlie Brown.
When my oldest daughter, Breeze, was about 2.5 or 3 years old, we were sitting down and watching Charlie Brown Christmas, and she'd never really been aware to watch it before. And I remember telling her, asking her, "Do you know who that is, that voice of Lucy?" And she said, "No." And I said, "It's me." And she looked at the television and listened. Then she looked back at me and she said, "No, it's not."
And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying,
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men.
That's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown.
Last spring, Congress awarded Charles Schulz posthumously the Congressional Medal of Freedom, presented to his wife Jeannie and his 5 children in the Capitol Rotunda. It seemed appropriate that the trio from the United States Marine Corps band played Linus and Lucy and Christmas Time Is Here, which have become, after all, American musical standards. On the back of the gold medal, the last words of Sparky's last comic strip were engraved. Speaking about his characters, he had written, "How can I ever forget them?" Speaking for hundreds of millions of fans around the world, I'm sure none of us will ever forget them either. I'd like to thank Sparky Schulz for a half a century of laughter and insights to the human condition, plus a very special thanks for A Charlie Brown Christmas. And everybody, happy holidays.